The barista at the daily grind didn't even look me in the eye when she said it. "Mrs. Vance, I'm very sorry, but your card was declined." She didn't know that her words would echo in my bones like a bell rung at a funeral. I stood there, clutching my worn leather wallet, feeling the heat creep up my neck. "I beg your pardon?" She gestured vaguely at the card machine. "Insufficient funds." I didn't need to see it. I heard her clearly the first time. Declined. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was drowning, standing still. Not when Arthur passed, not when I nursed my sister through her long illness, but here, under the cheerful hum of the espresso machine, I felt something inside me sink without reaching the bottom. I wasn't foolish. I wasn't the kind of woman who clicked suspicious links or gave away personal details. No, I was careful, methodical, a retired librarian who managed my own budget, paid my own bills, and balanced my checkbook to the penny. No one stole from me, at least not the kind of thief who wore a mask and carried a weapon. This one wore a smile, called me Mom, said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." It started 8 months ago with a conversation I should have walked away from. Marcus, my son, came over with his wife, Chloe. She brought a store-bought tart, still in its plastic container, like always. He brought his voice a little too smooth, like he was delivering a well-rehearsed pitch. Mom, he said, patting my hand with a touch that felt more professional than filial. "We've been thinking, it's a lot for you to manage on your own. All those investments, accounts, property taxes. Wouldn't it be easier if I helped?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the tart, its glaze unnaturally shiny. "I've been managing just fine," I said. My voice wasn't weak, but it wasn't firm either. "I know you have," he smiled. "But what if something happened? What if you had a fall, a health scare? We wouldn't even know how to access things. This way, we keep it simple. Just transfer the accounts. I'll handle the paperwork. No pressure." I looked at Chloe. She smiled too, her eyes already scanning my living room, perhaps mentally redecorating. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with the paperwork. I brewed myself chamomile tea, wrote Arthur's name on the edge of a coaster, a habit from when I missed him most. Would he have signed? The next morning, I did. At the time, I didn't feel fear. I felt trust, or the need to trust. Marcus had always been the capable one, the high school valedictorian, the ambitious architect, the one who always knew how to handle things. He had that voice, the kind that made people nod before they truly thought. Besides, wasn't that what we're told? Family takes care of family. I wasn't senile. I wasn't handing over the deed to my house. I was just making things easier, like he said. Weeks passed, then months. He stopped coming by. Chloe sent occasional texts, links to articles about senior living options, and photos of their new vacation home. My birthday passed without a call. I told myself they were busy. I still paid for my own groceries, my own utilities. He didn't change those. But my retirement savings, the small investment portfolio Arthur and I had built, the emergency fund I'd nurtured since his passing, all of that was now in Marcus's control. And today, standing at the coffee shop, trying to buy my usual Earl Grey, the barista said the word declined. I walked out without speaking. The late autumn wind whipped my hair across my face the second I pushed the door open. It was November, but the cold had bitten early this year. I clutched my coat tighter and headed for my car. The world around me was a blur of muted colors I couldn't name. When I sat in the driver's seat, I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't scream either. I simply looked at the steering wheel and thought, this is what betrayal feels like. Not sharp, not sudden, just quiet, cold, deliberate. I pulled out my old flip phone, still preferred it, and dialed Marcus's number. It rang 5 times before he picked up. Mom? His voice was casual, almost jovial. Everything okay? I looked through the windshield across the rows of parked cars. No, Marcus, it's not. I don't understand, he said, though his tone didn't sound confused, just annoyed. I went to the coffee shop, I answered calmly. My card was declined. They said there's nothing left. There was a pause. I could hear movement, like he was walking somewhere, perhaps to get out of earshot. Mom, you're scaring me. What do you mean nothing left? That can't be right. I asked them twice, I replied. Insufficient funds. The retirement account is gone. So are the investments, every cent. He exhaled, a long practiced sigh. All right, listen. There's probably just a mistake. These things happen. Maybe something got miscategorized. I'll check into it. Okay? A mistake. That word floated in the air between us like steam from a cracked pipe. Harmless until you noticed the smell. I'd lived long enough to know the difference between a mistake and a lie. A mistake apologizes before you ask. A lie tries to distract you with softness. I'd like the access restored, I said. I want everything put back in my name. He chuckled, actually chuckled. Mom, come on. That's not how this works. You gave me access. You signed the paperwork. It's not like flipping a light switch. I want my money back, Marcus. Now he was quiet. The silence made my fingers go cold. I needed to move a few things around, he finally said. We hit a rough patch, just temporarily. You remember Chloe's gallery opening last spring? The expenses were astronomical, and the renovations on the lake house are through the roof. I figured, hey, better to borrow from family than rack up credit card debt. Borrow. That word snapped something clean inside me. He didn't ask. He didn't even tell me. He took, then built a story around it, like I was just another pocket to reach into. You didn't borrow, Marcus, I said. You cleaned me out. Don't be dramatic, he replied. You've still got the house, right? You're not homeless. I stared through the windshield at an old couple walking their dog. They looked about my age, bundled in matching scarves, moving in step. I imagined them sipping tea after dinner, splitting a scone, arguing softly over a crossword. I'll come by later this week, he said. We can go over everything. It's not as bad as it looks, I promise. He hung up before I could reply. I sat there for 10 full minutes, not moving, just breathing. The keys lay untouched in the ignition. The world kept going around me. People pulling out of parking spots, kids whining in back seats, wind stirring up old leaves from under cars. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was shame. Not for him, for me, for thinking I could still trust my son the way I once trusted his tiny fingers to wrap around mine without squeezing too tight, for believing that family by default meant protection. I'd made excuses for him before, when he forgot birthdays, when he borrowed money that never came back, when Chloe slipped in comments about how old-fashioned my decor was, when they stopped inviting me for holidays and started sending photos instead. Every time I folded inward like a wilting flower. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, that keeping the peace mattered more than keeping score. But today, there was no more folding. I started the car and drove home. My hands were steady on the wheel. The cold had settled deeper into my knees and wrists, but I didn't mind. Pain was something I understood. It didn't lie. Back home, I made tea. Not the bagged kind, the real kind, with loose leaves and a proper steep. I pulled the worn wooden box from the top shelf of my closet, the one with every document Arthur and I had ever saved, our mortgage, our wills, my bank statements, the small college fund we'd opened when Marcus was 12 and talked of becoming an astronaut. He changed his mind, of course. Architecture was more practical. I flipped through the pages and found the authorization form, my signature, neat and certain, his a little hurried. Then I called the bank. The voice on the line was polite, efficient, a younger woman named Ms. Chen. "I'd like to revoke a financial power of attorney," I said. "Of course, ma'am. We'll need to verify some information and schedule an appointment to process everything properly." She sounded surprised. Not many women my age make that call. Most just let it happen. The slow draining of autonomy disguised as help. But I wasn't most, and I wasn't finished. Ms. Chen from the bank gave me an appointment for Tuesday morning. I marked it on the wall calendar with a red pen, the same way I used to mark school plays and dental visits. I didn't sleep well that night, not because of fear, that had passed, but because my mind wouldn't settle. It was like someone had lifted the rug in my memory, and all the little dust bunnies of doubt and guilt started tumbling out. I kept asking myself the same quiet question. When did I stop being his mother and start being his resource? Not in one moment. It never is. It's always in inches. It was there the first time he said, "Don't worry, Mom, I've got it covered," and then asked me to transfer him the difference. It was there when I paid for his studio rent for just 2 months after he claimed a creative block. A block, he didn't tell me, was actually a voluntary sabbatical. It was there when Chloe gave me a Christmas card without signing it. It was there in every missed call, every favor wrapped in warmth, every lie so subtle it almost looked like kindness, and I let it happen. That's the part that kept me up. Tuesday morning came, gray and slow. I put on my best wool trousers, charcoal gray, neatly pressed, and a silk blouse Arthur used to call my thinking color, deep amethyst. It made my eyes look alive even when I didn't feel it. Miss Chen greeted me with a firm handshake and eyes that kept darting toward the clock. I handed her the folder I'd prepared, statements, authorizations, notes I'd written in the margins. A little too neatly, perhaps. Years of cataloging books made me thorough. "I'd like to restore full control of these accounts to my name," I said, "and revoke any third-party access, including my son's." Ms. Chen nodded. Professional. No questions. That was a mercy. When we finished, she stood and offered me a copy of the new paperwork. "There may be a few pending transactions already in process," she said, flipping through the forms. "Some withdrawals were made just 2 days ago, one in the amount of $7,500. Do you recognize that?" "No," I said. She hesitated. "Would you like us to open a fraud claim?" I thought about the word fraud. It felt too clean, too legal. What Marcus had done wasn't just financial. It was personal, intimate. He hadn't hacked my password. He'd leaned into the trust I'd wrapped him in, since he was a boy, with scraped knees. Not yet, I said. Let's wait. Ms. Chen looked like she wanted to say something else. Maybe she'd seen this before. Maybe not. As I left the bank, a gust of wind caught the door and nearly slammed it shut behind me. I held it steady, let it close, softly, quiet strength. That's what I had left. At home, I brewed another cup of tea and sat down at the table. I thought about the Thanksgiving 6 years ago when Marcus had forgotten to bring the special wine he promised. It was crazy at the firm, Mom. I'm doing the best I can. I told him it was fine, that I'd bought a bottle just in case. I always did that. Bought one just in case. Paid one just in case. Offered help just in case. But now, the just in case had a cost, and it was me. I picked up the phone and dialed another number. Not Marcus's, Maya's, my youngest, the one who moved to Vancouver Island 10 years ago and always sent handwritten letters, even when I mailed her something small. She picked up on the second ring. Mom, everything okay? I paused. I hadn't told her yet. I hadn't told anyone. No, darling, not really. Her voice dropped. What happened? And so I told her. Not everything, not yet, but enough. That her brother had taken control of my finances, that the money was gone, that I'd taken it back. There was silence on her end, but not the kind that hides shame. Mom, she said quietly, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. If I'd known... I know, I interrupted gently. You would have come sooner. But I didn't know either. Not really. We talked for a while. She asked if I needed anything. I said no. She offered to fly in. I said, not yet. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't in days, relief. Not because anything was fixed, but because I wasn't hiding anymore. I'd started telling the truth, first to myself, then to someone else. And that was the first real step. The grocery store was the same as always. Too cold in the dairy aisle, too loud by the self-checkout, and full of people who barely looked at each other. I walked slowly, pushing the cart with both hands, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to feel the weight of it, something solid, something that rolled forward when I told it to. The young woman at the checkout counter recognized me. Mrs. Vance, your order's ready. Just the usual, right? I nodded, reached for my wallet, and felt the pause. That moment, the one that used to be automatic, unthinking, open, swipe, done. Now it came with a flicker of doubt. The card had been replaced, new number, new security measures. But the memory of standing at that bank, hearing declined, hadn't left me. I handed it over. She smiled politely and ran it through. Approved. She bagged my reusable tote and handed me the receipt. Take care of yourself, all right. That's the thing. I was finally outside. The air smelled like winter trying to hold on. Damp pavement, skeletal tree branches, the promise of spring not quite kept. I put the groceries in the trunk and sat in the driver's seat for a while before starting the engine. Just breathing, just existing. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking, but I was remembering. Marcus was 8 when he first learned how to lie. I remember it because it was the same day he learned how to apologize. He had broken Maya's favorite ceramic bird, the one from her school project, and blamed it on the cat. I found the pieces under his bed. He cried, big, wet boy tears, and said, I didn't mean to. Arthur had pulled him aside after. I didn't hear the whole conversation, just the last line my husband said quietly, but firm. Son, meaning to isn't the same as doing right. That was the line I thought of as I drove home. Marcus hadn't meant to hurt me. I believed that. He hadn't set out to destroy my trust, but he had, and now the harm stood. At home, I unpacked slowly. The kettle went on. The fresh bread went in the pantry, and then, almost without thinking, I pulled out the small, fireproof box from the top of my wardrobe. Inside were the documents I hadn't touched in years: Arthur's will, the house deed, my old pension statements. One envelope was labeled Lily's Future. I'd started it when Maya had her first child, meaning to add to it every year. But time had gotten away from me. Now I opened it and pulled out a piece of paper, a draft letter to my attorney. I started writing a new one. Dear Mr. Albright, I would like to set up a living trust in the name of my granddaughter, Lily Vance, and assign a portion of my estate to it immediately. I also request a review of my current will and any documents that grant access or authority to my son, Marcus. Please consider this a formal request to remove him as financial agent and beneficiary. Respectfully, Alara M. Vance. I read it twice, then once more. Then I folded it, placed it in a fresh envelope, and wrote the lawyer's name in neat block letters. That night, I dreamed I was back in the house where I grew up. My grandmother was sitting on the porch swing, shelling peas and looking out across the fields. In the dream, I was a child again, knees scraped, dress wrinkled. And I asked her, "What if people stop loving you?" She looked at me, took a pea pod from her apron, and said, "Then you love yourself twice as hard." I woke up before dawn. The house was quiet. My knees ached. The window was open just an inch too far, and the breeze had turned cool. I pulled the blanket up and sat there in the silence. I didn't feel powerful or angry or even sad. I just felt awake, more awake than I'd been in years. The waiting room at Albright and Associates smelled like old books and quiet ambition. I sat in the same leather chair I'd sat in when Arthur and I first updated our wills. That was 1995. The chair hadn't aged, but I had. I was the only one there, unless you count the paralegal, who smiled like she wasn't sure if I was confused or determined. Maybe I was both. Mrs. Vance, Mr. Albright himself opened the door, just like always. He wore the same tweed jacket, same silver-rimmed glasses, same careful voice. We didn't shake hands. That was fine by me. "I read your letter," he said once the door closed, "and I want to make sure I understand. You'd like to revoke all powers of attorney granted to your son?" "Yes." "And you're transferring a portion of your estate into a trust for your granddaughter, Lily?" "Yes, and I want to update my will. Remove Marcus." He nodded slowly. "Might I ask why?" I took a deep breath. "Because he spent nearly every cent I saved across a lifetime without telling me. Because I gave him access to help me. And he used it to help himself because he lied. And when I asked him about it, he didn't apologize. He rationalized. Albright didn't flinch. He just made a few notes. "This won't be difficult," he said. "We'll need some signatures, but we can complete it today. Do you want to include a letter of explanation in the file?" I shook my head. "No, let the documents speak for themselves." He paused. "He may contest it. Try to argue you were coerced or not, of sound mind. It's not uncommon." "Do I look unsound to you?" That made him smile just a little. "No, ma'am. You look like someone who finally stopped hoping people would change." That surprised me, not the truth of it. just that someone else said it out loud. We worked for nearly 2 hours. Papers slid across the desk, one after another. My signature grew less tidy but more certain. When it was over, I placed my pen down and looked out the window. There were people passing on the street. A student with a backpack, a man walking his bicycle, a woman carrying a pot of chrysanthemums. Life didn't slow down for anyone. Not for pain, not for pride. "Anything else I can help with?" Albright asked. I thought for a moment. If he calls, if Marcus tries to challenge this, I want you to remind him that it wasn't one thing that brought us here. It was every little thing he thought I wouldn't notice. But I noticed. I'll make a note of that. I stood, buttoned my coat, and picked up my purse. It felt lighter than usual, maybe because I'd left the weight of decades in that office. Back home, I called Maya. "Lily's trust is official," I said. "It's not a fortune, but it'll grow. It's protected now." She didn't say anything for a moment. When she did, her voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Mom, you didn't have to do that." "I know," I said, "but I wanted to. She's the only one who visits without an agenda." Maya exhaled. "I'm flying in next month." "You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." After we hung up, I sat in my chair by the window, the same one where I'd read to Arthur through his last months, the same one where I held a feverish Marcus when he was 5, the same one I almost gave away last autumn, thinking it was time to simplify. I was glad I hadn't. Some things you hold on to, some things you let go, and sometimes it takes a lifetime to learn the difference. The phone rang at 6:30 p.m. I knew it would be him before I even looked at the screen. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 6:35, again at 6:50, then a text. "Mom, we need to talk. Call me." I turned the phone over on the table and kept watering my houseplants. He'd spent the last 8 months answering none of my questions, ignoring my silence, taking without checking. And now, suddenly, he needed to talk. It was remarkable, really, how fast concern blooms when consequences arrive. I kept watering, each leaf glistening, firm. It wasn't about cleanliness. It was control. The little kind that doesn't depend on anyone else. At 7:05, he called again. I answered this time. "Hello," I said. "Mom, thank God. Listen, we need to figure something out." "Do we?" "Yes. I mean, Chloe just tried to use the joint account card and it got declined. Then I called the bank and they said everything's frozen. They said you came in." "I did." "You didn't tell me you were doing that." "I didn't know I had to." The silence on his end was thick, not empty, just full of all the things he wasn't used to hearing from me. "You could have warned me," he said, voice tense. "I have bills pending, accounts linked to that card. Lily's art camp deposit." "Lily's art camp deposit," I interrupted. "You're using my accounts for Lily's tuition?" "I was going to pay it back." "You've said that before." I could hear his breathing, fast, short. "You don't understand," he said. "Things have been hard. My firm's not what it used to be, and Chloe's still recovering from the gallery losses, and none of that justifies stealing." He flinched. I could tell, even through the phone. "I didn't steal, Mom. Don't say that." "You gave me access, and you abused it." Silence. "Then why are you doing this to me?" That was the moment, the exact moment I realized we weren't even having the same conversation. He thought I was doing something to him, not something for myself. I took a slow breath. "Marcus, this isn't revenge. This isn't punishment. It's protection. For me." From you. You're acting like I'm some kind of criminal. You're acting like I'm an endless resource. More silence. You left me with nothing, I said. You drained accounts I built with your father. You spent money you didn't earn. And when I asked where it went, you said, "Don't worry." That's not how grown-ups operate, Marcus. I was just trying to keep everything afloat at my expense. I expected him to hang up. Instead, his voice dropped. "Do you want me to beg?" "No," I said. "I want you to understand." "And what if I don't?" "Then that's not my burden anymore." After the call, I made myself toast with real butter. Not the low-fat spread Chloe always insisted was healthier. I sat at the kitchen table and ate slowly. Outside, the wind was picking up. The old maple tree, out front, had started to shed its last golden leaves. They scattered across the porch like forgotten memories. I picked up the phone again, dialed Albright's office, and left a message. Please proceed with filing the full restriction order on all joint accounts and add a clause about no third-party access reinstatement without my written approval. Thank you. I hung up and set the phone down again. This time, it didn't ring. I always believed the worst part of betrayal would be the pain, but it wasn't. The worst part was the adjustment. Waking up each day and remembering that the person you raised with lullabies and bedtime stories would now rather argue about access rights than say, "I'm sorry." The apology never came, not the next day, not the one after. Instead, there were more messages. One said, "Let's be adults about this." Another, "You're blowing this out of proportion." And then, "You're making it impossible for me to fix anything." I didn't respond. What was there to fix? A few days later, I went to see Mr. Albright again. He had the final trust documents ready, along with the revised will. Everything neat, signed, legal. "Lily's trust is airtight now," he said, tapping the folder gently. "Even if your son tries to contest it, he won't get far." "Good." He leaned back. "I have to say, Mrs. Vance, I see a lot of clients make moves out of spite, but you're very clear. I respect that." "It's not spite, Mr. Albright. It's correction." He nodded, not smiling this time. When I got home, I found a letter in the mail. Not a bill, not junk mail, a real letter from Lily. The envelope was decorated with tiny watercolor flowers, the ink slightly smudged. "Grandma, Mom and Dad are being weird lately. I heard them whispering about money, and then Dad said something like, 'It's all gone now anyway.'" He looked really angry. I asked what was wrong, but no one told me. "I don't know what's happening, but I hope you're okay. You can call me if you want, even if Dad says not to. I won't tell. I love you, and I still have the pressed flower bookmark you gave me when I was 8. Love, Lily." I sat down slowly, letter in hand, and reread it twice. So Marcus was starting to unravel. Good. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because finally the truth was making itself known. He couldn't hide it anymore. Not behind borrowed warmth, not behind Chloe's forced smiles, not behind my silence. Lily knew something was wrong. Children always do. I went to my writing desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of stationery. "Dear Lily, thank you for writing to me. It means more than you can imagine. Yes, things are a little complicated right now, but not because of you. You've done nothing wrong. In fact, you've done everything right. You're kind, thoughtful, and brave enough to ask questions when something feels off. Please don't worry. I'm safe, and you're safe too. One day, when you're older, We'll talk about what happened. I'll tell you everything, not to make you sad, but so you can understand how important it is to never give away your power, not even to people you love. Until then, keep your bookmark safe. It's a reminder that we're always connected, even when the people in between try to keep us apart. With all my love, Grandma. I folded the letter, tucked it into an envelope, and placed it on the table for mailing in the morning. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead I felt something else. A quiet calm, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix what someone broke on purpose. The next time Marcus came to the house, he didn't knock. He used his old key, the one I'd forgotten he had. I was in the kitchen, polishing my antique silver tea set, when I heard the door open, and then his voice call out, casual, as if nothing had happened. "Mom?" I didn't answer right away. I wiped my hands on the soft cloth, set down a sugar spoon, and stepped into the living room. He was already halfway inside, holding his phone in one hand, keys in the other. "You shouldn't use that key anymore," I said. He looked up, startled. "What?" "I changed the locks yesterday." He blinked. "Why?" "I don't want you walking into my home unannounced." He stared at me, like I'd said something rude, like I'd forgotten my place. "You're serious?" "Very." He shifted his weight, looked around the room like it had changed somehow. It hadn't, only I had. "I thought we could talk," he said, trying for warmth. "Face to face, no more cold shoulders." "You mean no more accountability?" "Mom." "Marcus, what do you want?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then sighed. A different kind of sigh than before. Not condescending, but tired, real. "I messed up," he said finally. "I know that." I didn't move, didn't speak. He continued. "I thought I could juggle it all. The firm, Lily's tuition, the gallery losses. I thought if I could just get through a rough patch, it would be okay. But it snowballed fast. "And so you used my money," I said, "without telling me. I thought I could pay it back eventually, but you didn't ask. I didn't think I had to. You always helped. You never said no before." There it was, the sentence that explained everything and nothing. "I never said no," I repeated. "And that's why you stopped asking." He didn't respond. I walked over to the armchair, the one he used to curl up in with picture books, and sat down slowly. My knees complained, but I didn't let it show. "I've spent years doing things for you, Marcus. Paying your bills, watching your children, biting my tongue. And do you know what I've gotten in return?" His lips parted, then closed. Not visits, not care, not respect, just more requests, more withdrawals, literal and emotional. He finally looked me in the eye. "I'm sorry," he said, and this time it sounded closer to true. But truth isn't always enough. "I don't hate you, I see. I see. But I won't trust you the same way again." He nodded slowly, a small movement, like someone absorbing bad news, but not fighting it. "What now?" he asked. "Now you leave," I said gently, "and we start from zero. Not with, with money, with, behavior." He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. "I'll give the key back," he said quietly. "You already did," I said, "by showing me who you are." He left without another word. I didn't cry. I returned to the kitchen, picked up my polishing cloth, and resumed cleaning the silver, one piece at a time. The silence after he left wasn't empty. It was thick, settled, like a room after the guests go home, and the dust finally gets permission to fall. I didn't move for a long time. The tea set sat half-polished on the counter, the silver browning slightly, lemon oil clinging to the air. I just stood there, listening to the quiet hum of my own house. It felt like the first time I'd really heard it in years. There were no raised voices, no explanations, no justifications trailing down the hallway. Just space, clean, undisturbed space. I didn't hate Marcus. I didn't wish him harm, but I no longer mistook guilt for love or panic for urgency. He had crossed a line, not all at once, but inch by inch over years. And I'd let him because I loved him, because I wanted to believe he'd never truly take advantage, that he'd stop just before the edge. But some people only stop when they're caught, and even then, they're not sorry they jumped, only sorry someone saw. That weekend, Maya arrived from Vancouver Island. Her flight was delayed, but she didn't complain. When she came through the door, I saw the worry in her face, not the frantic kind, but the slow, quiet dread of a daughter who'd seen too many good people worn down by too many small betrayals. She dropped her carry-on at the door and hugged me tightly. "Are you okay?" she whispered into my shoulder. "I am now," I said. We sat at the kitchen table the way we used to, herbal tea between us, windows open, birds singing, as if nothing in the world had changed, but everything had. "I spoke to Marcus," she said carefully. "He called me after you froze the accounts." I didn't flinch. "What did he say?" She hesitated. "That you'd overreacted, that he was managing things responsibly, that you blindsided him." I smiled, the kind of smile that only comes after a long, bitter lesson. "And do you believe him?" "No," she said without pause. "Not anymore." That was all I needed. We talked into the afternoon. She asked questions I hadn't been ready to answer before, about the money, the bank, the documents, the things I'd swallowed for years. I told her everything. When I finished, she looked down into her tea, her fingers wrapped tight around the mug. "I should have paid more attention," she said. "I should have seen this coming." "You couldn't have," I said. "He was very careful, and I was very quiet." That silence had protected him for years, but not anymore. That night, we baked an apple crumble together, just like when she was a girl. She peeled the apples. I mixed the topping. And we both agreed the cinnamon was never quite enough. "Do you remember when Dad used to hum while he baked?" she asked. "Always off key," I smiled. We laughed. The kitchen warmed. And for the first time in a long time, the memory of Arthur didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a reminder. I'd loved. I'd been loved. And I hadn't lost everything, just a son who never really saw me. On Monday morning, I called the county clerk's office and requested a property title review. It wasn't urgent, not legally, but emotionally, it was everything. Marcus had once asked me offhandedly to consider adding his name to the house deed for efficiency. That was 4 years ago, during a visit where he brought expensive coffee and left before it was brewed. I'd said no, but now I needed to be certain. I needed to see in writing that nothing had slipped through while I wasn't looking. When you hand over one kind of access, it becomes easier, dangerously easier, for people to reach further without asking. Maya drove me to the clerk's office. She didn't hover, didn't treat me like glass. She waited in the lobby while I walked to the counter and gave my name. The clerk, a young woman with kind eyes, looked at the screen and smiled. "You're the sole owner, Mrs. Vance. It's all in your name. No liens, no additional parties listed. I nodded once, sharp and quiet. Thank you. Maya stood when I returned, reading my expression before I spoke. All clear, all mine, I said. That afternoon, we went to see Mr. Albright again. I want to add the house to Lily's trust, I said as soon as we sat down. Effective immediately, but only after my passing. She's the only one I trust not to sell it the moment I'm gone. He didn't ask questions, just made the notes. Maya was quiet through the whole meeting, but afterward in the car, she finally spoke. You don't have to give everything to Lily, Mom. I mean, I'm not asking for anything, but I know, I said gently, and that's exactly why you deserve more than you're asking for. She didn't respond, but I saw her blink quickly, looking out the window. I'm not doing this to punish Marcus, I added. I'm doing it to prevent further damage. He's already taken more than enough. She nodded. Understood. There was a kind of peace in the car, the kind you get only after everyone stops pretending. That evening, I wrote one more letter, not to Lily this time, to Marcus. Marcus, this letter is not an invitation to argue. You've asked me several times now why I've taken the steps I've taken. Here is your answer. For years, I supported you financially, emotionally, even logistically. I helped with the down payment on your first apartment. I paid for Lily's early child care. I co-signed your studio lease. I did all of it quietly, without keeping a scorecard. But while I was keeping peace, you were keeping tabs. You saw my help as permanent, automatic, expected. You stopped saying thank you, then you stopped asking. And when you drained my savings, you didn't explain. You didn't confess. You lied. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. I have now protected what remains for myself, for Lily, for Maya. Not to punish you, but because I finally learned trust is not a debt owed. It's a gift. And you returned it damaged. There is no need to respond to this letter. If you want a relationship going forward, it will not be built on guilt, shame, or entitlement. It will be built on effort and honesty. Two things you still have the chance to give, Mom. I folded the letter carefully, sealed it, and placed it near the door. Maya would mail it in the morning. I didn't need to see his reaction. Some truths are delivered for closure, not response. Marcus didn't write back. Not that week, not the next. And honestly, I didn't expect him to. Maya stayed with me for 3 more days. We cooked. We walked. We laughed a little more than I thought we would. She was quiet when she needed to be, and warm without being careful. A kind of grace I hadn't known I'd missed. On her last morning here, she made us breakfast. Scrambled eggs the way I liked, not the way Chloe once insisted was healthier. We ate on the porch while the morning light filtered through the budding trees. I'll come back in May, she said. Lily wants to help plant your herb garden. I smiled. Tell her she can pick her own corner of the raised bed. She'll love that. We hugged tightly at the door, but not desperately. It wasn't goodbye. Not anymore. 4 days later, I got a call from the bank. Not from Miss Chen this time, but from someone higher up, a senior advisor who said she was following up on some account flags. Just routine, she said, but I wanted to make sure you were aware. Several automatic transfers were attempted from your closed accounts. One in particular was flagged because it appeared to originate from a saved device, your son's. I didn't answer right away. I let her finish her sentence. Of course they were blocked, she added quickly. Everything is under your name again. But we wanted to make sure you're not under pressure. I almost laughed at that. No, I said, not anymore. After the call, I walked through the house slowly, checking doors, opening windows, letting spring come in where winter had overstayed. There was a time when I would have called Marcus right then, given him a chance to explain, to deny, to squirm, but I'd outgrown that urge. There was nothing left to salvage, not the accounts, not the excuses, not the old rhythm of family as performance. That weekend, Lily called, not Maya. Lily. Hi, Grandma, she said, cheerful and shy all at once. I just wanted to say thank you for the letter. I'd forgotten Maya had mailed it with hers. You're welcome, sweetheart. Did you get my note? I did. I read it twice. I showed it to Mom, too. She said, you're the bravest person she knows. That made me quiet. Also, she added, I looked up what a trust is. I think it's really cool. I want to be smart with money, too. I smiled. Smart and kind. That's the best kind of wealth. She told me about school, how she was reading A Wrinkle in Time, how she'd been picked for a poetry slam. She said she'd been trying to sketch again, but the perspective still gave her trouble. I think I pressed too hard, she said. You'll learn, I said. It's not about force. It's about knowing when to stop. We talked for nearly 20 minutes before she said goodbye, promising to send me photos of her herb garden plot once she started planting. When the call ended, I sat still for a moment, holding the phone in my lap. The past few months had been full of endings, quiet ones, painful ones, but here, in the voice of a granddaughter, in the scent of spring pushing through the open window, was something I hadn't expected. A beginning. It was early spring when the cracks finally started to show. Not in my walls, in Marcuse's. The first sign came from Chloe of all people. A voicemail left in that clipped, brittle tone she reserved for forced politeness. Elara, I know things have been tense, but Marcus is going through a hard time right now. If there's anything you can do to help him reconsider some of the financial measures, I think it would mean a lot to him, to us, as if I'd ever been part of that. I didn't call back. A few days later, a letter arrived, formal, templated, unsigned. Final notice, overdue studio rent payment. Not addressed to me, of course, but I recognized the building, the amount, the printed urgency. They were behind. I sat down in the living room and stared at the letter for a long while, not in glee, not even satisfaction, just confirmation. This was what I'd feared, and what he'd tried to pretend wasn't happening. Marcus had taken my money to prop up an illusion, and now the illusion was falling apart. I didn't call him. I didn't warn Maya either. There was no need to stir the pot with sympathy. Some things have to burn clean. A week later, Ms. Chen from the bank called again. We've had multiple attempts to access the closed accounts, Mrs. Vance. Password resets, device verifications. Nothing has gone through, but we wanted you to be aware. Is it my son? We can't legally confirm, she said, but I'd advise caution. Thank you. I already changed the locks. She didn't laugh, but I think she understood. Then came the moment I didn't expect. Another voicemail, but this time from Marcus himself. His voice cracked at the edges like glass under pressure. Mom, I didn't know what I was doing, okay? I kept thinking I could fix it, that something would come through, but it didn't. And now They're threatening to evict us from the studio. And Chloe's done nothing but cry. And Lily, Jesus, Mom, I'm sorry. I messed up. I messed up so bad. I listened to it twice, not because I doubted what I heard, but because I wanted to be sure I didn't feel anything. And I didn't. No vindication, no warmth, no anger, just space. Empty space where his voice used to carry weight. I deleted the message. That evening, I opened the cupboard and pulled out the old teapot, the porcelain one with the tiny blue forget-me-nots. Arthur had given it to me for our 10th anniversary. I brewed a full pot, sliced a piece of the lemon poppy seed cake Maya had made last month and frozen for me, and sat at the kitchen table with a book. Outside, dusk was settling into its soft blue silence. No phones rang, no knocks came, no requests. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt not just peace, but clarity. I didn't owe him my silence or my outrage or my attention. I had offered him trust, and he had offered me convenience, control, excuses. But now the accounts were locked. The trust was sealed, the house protected, and me, I was still standing. He came to the house 3 days later. I saw him through the window, standing at the edge of the walkway, not quite ready to come up the steps. His shoulders had fallen. He wasn't wearing his usual tailored jacket, just a wrinkled polo shirt, and a look that didn't belong to him when he was 15, but fit too well now. He stood there for a full minute before ringing the bell. I opened the door, but didn't move aside. "Hi," he said. His voice was low, small. "Alara." He shifted his weight, looked past me, maybe hoping Maya would appear and soften the moment. She didn't. He looked down at the steps. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." I didn't answer. Not right away. "You already said that on the voicemail." He nodded. "I know, but I needed to say it in person." I waited. "I ruined things," he said. "I know that. And I've been trying to think of what to do to make it right, but I can't. There's no fixing this, is there?" "No," I said. "There's only changing what you do next." He looked up at me, eyes tired, not rehearsed this time. I thought I was doing what men are supposed to do, handle things, carry the weight. I just kept thinking, if I can hold on long enough, Mom will understand. She always has. I did understand, I said. That was the problem. I understood too much for too long. He swallowed hard. "Is it too late?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "for what we used to have." He nodded again, slower this time. "I lost everything." You lost access," I corrected. "Not everything." He closed his eyes just for a second, then opened them again. "I miss when things were simpler." "You mean when I carried the consequences and you just called it family?" He didn't argue. I let the silence stretch. "You're not a bad man, Marcus," I said finally. "But you've lived too long thinking that being my son was the same as being my partner. It's not. You never stood beside me. You stood behind me and waited for what I'd give." He winced. "I still want a relationship," he said. "Then stop asking for one. Start earning it." He blinked, then looked away, out toward the sidewalk. "I guess I'll go." "You should." He took a step back, then paused. "If you ever need anything..." I didn't let him finish. "I've already built a life where I don't." He nodded once, then walked away. When the door closed behind him, I stood for a long moment in the hallway, not grieving, not triumphant, just settled. I had spent most of my adult life believing that love meant staying, fixing, giving. Now I knew that love, real love, sometimes meant leaving a door closed and locking it. The days got longer, not just in light, but in feeling. Mornings stretched into afternoon without interruption. No calls, no knocks, no voices trying to wedge themselves into my silence. It was the kind of quiet that didn't beg to be filled, the kind that made room for small pleasures again. I baked more, real butter, real sugar, no substitutions. I walked every morning, slow but steady. The woman down the street, Mrs. Gable, with the garden full of hydrangeas, started waving when she saw me pass. One afternoon, I saw the neighbor's boy fall off his scooter, scraped his knee, no worse than what I'd seen 100 times. I went inside, came out with a cold cloth and a Band-Aid. He smiled, said, "Thank you." No mother in sight. People forget how much older women know, how many kinds of pain we've already held and folded away. Lily wrote again. This time it was a long letter, typed with tiny floral doodles in the margins. She told me she'd started a nature journal, that she wanted to identify all the birds in her backyard and maybe grow sunflowers, but the squirrels might claim them all. She asked if I had any stories about Arthur, because her dad seemed sad lately, and she wanted to know about happy times. She ended the letter with P.S. I'm learning to say no. I think it's going to save me. I pinned that line above my desk. I used to think survival was about endurance, how much you could carry, how long you could smile, underweight. But no, survival is knowing what to set down. One evening, I found a photo I'd forgotten I kept. Me and Arthur, just after our wedding. He's holding my hand like he's proud to be chosen. I'm looking at him, not the camera. Neither of us smiling, but both of us knowing. He never betrayed me. He wasn't perfect, but he was solid. He taught Marcus how to change a tire and build a birdhouse, but not how to apologize. That part should have been mine, and maybe I was too tired by then. I looked at that photo and didn't cry, just whispered. I handled it. And I had, without fury, without lawyers barking, without shouting or slamming doors, just paperwork, clarity, a locked gate, and a sturdy heart. Maya came again, brought Lily this time. They planted 2 rows of lavender, 1 row of rosemary, and an ambitious patch of forget-me-nots that probably won't survive the slugs. But it wasn't about the blooms. It was about hands in dirt, about Lily laughing when a ladybug tickled her hand, about Maya watching her daughter kneel in the same garden where she used to play in overalls and rubber boots. They stayed for dinner. I made a simple pot roast and creamy mashed potatoes with extra chives. Lily set the table. Maya poured sparkling cider. We didn't talk about Marcus, but after dessert, when Lily went out back to check on the lavender, Maya lingered by the sink. You did the right thing, she said softly, even if it hurt. I know. He hasn't called me since. He will when he needs something. She nodded. I'm not answering this time, she said. I'm tired of holding the thread while he unravels. I turned off the tap, looked at my daughter, the woman she'd become. We don't owe him our peace. After they left, I sat by the open window and listened to the night. Crickets, distant traffic, wind brushing the trees, like a hush. There was a part of me that wanted to say I felt victorious, but I didn't. I just felt whole, not healed, not in the cheap, glossy way people write in cards, not forgetful, not blank, just whole. I had boundaries now. And boundaries don't make you lonely, they make you safe. It's taken me a lifetime to learn that a closed door isn't always a loss. Sometimes it's the beginning of a house that finally feels like yours again. Spring turned into early summer. The trees filled out. The garden took shape. Even the old bird bath in the back, long untouched, began to attract robins again when Lily visited. There were no miracles, no dramatic turnarounds. Marcus didn't appear with flowers or tears. There were no sudden letters of repentance, no envelopes stuffed with checks. He simply vanished, or rather receded, like a tide that took too much with it and knew better than to return. I didn't chase him. I didn't wish him well or ill. I just wished him elsewhere. One morning I woke before the sun. The house was still, that rare kind of quiet you only get when even the birds haven't started yet. I sat on the edge of the bed and ran my hand over the quilt I'd sewn the year Arthur died. Each patch had a story. Scraps of Lily's baby blanket, Maya's favorite childhood dress, an old kitchen towel Marcus once used to wipe paint. We were all stitched together once. Now the seams had shifted, and that was all right. I stood, made tea, and sat by the window. The sky was just beginning to blue. The garden shimmered in its sleepy dew. Everything was alive, and I was in it, not above it, not beneath it, in it. Later that day, I took the envelope marked "Final Copy, Will and Trust," and placed it in the safe, not out of fear, but as a kind of declaration. This is mine, all of it, my name, my story, my piece. That afternoon, I wrote one last letter to no one in particular, or maybe to someone like you. If you are reading this and you've ever felt what I felt, the silence after someone takes what was never theirs, the ache of being useful instead of loved, the shame of trusting someone who smiled too wide, I want to tell you something. You are not foolish. You are not weak. You are not alone. We are told, especially as women, and especially as we age, that keeping the peace is noble, that being needed is the same as being valued, that to speak up is to cause trouble. But peace without dignity is not peace, and silence, no matter how gracious, is not love if it's swallowed out of fear. I lost money, yes, but that's not the real story. The real story is what I found afterward. I found my spine. I found my voice. And in the quiet of my own home, I found myself. So, if you're sitting where I sat, wondering if you're imagining things, if it's worth the trouble, if speaking up will make you difficult, let me tell you, be difficult, be clear, be free. And if this story reached you, share it, comment, tell someone. Not for me, for the next woman who's still too quiet, too polite, too scared. She needs to know she's not crazy, she's not alone, and it's not too late.